Well, how's everyone doing this morning? Thanks for tuning in to part of your day and jumping back into Zoom, which if you're anything like me, it's where you spend a lot of your work day for the past year. So I know uh, it takes a little extra energy to log in. So I'm just thankful everyone has decided to join me today, and hopefully this will be a helpful primer on specifically trying to do 2D animated work remotely, and we'll go over that. Yeah, I'm excited to be here with all of you as well. I've got a few things that I'll end up sharing, and I'll jump back to my screens. But my name is Geoff Marslett, and I have been working as an animator and a film director, as well as also, a producer and sometimes actor, oftentimes writer, occasional sound or cinematography. So I've done a lot of jobs, as is, I think, the case of most of us who built up a career in independent cinema for the past 21 years, something like that. It starts going on so long, I don't like to admit how long I've been doing it, but I've also been a professor for most of that time and helped build the animation department over at UT Austin once upon a time before leaving there and taking over narrative production here in Colorado, where I'm at. So I've got a lot of different experiences, even spent, it looks like I see a familiar name over there that I even met for a year, where I spent helping develop curriculum over at Carnegie Mellon for doing filmmaking. So I'll try to bring all those experiences into this to some degree, but my focus today is, to help people understand the benefits and challenges and even a few specifics of how to work remotely in an animation environment. And I'm going to focus specifically on 2D. I will occasionally mention things about 3D, but the general workflow of 3D is, I guess I would call, more technically oriented, and you need team members who are doing very specific things, and you often need lots of computing power. So in some ways, a higher end 3D environment doesn't lend itself quite as easily to the remote and poses new challenges. So I'll bring up a little bit of that. But I'm going to focus mostly on sort of DIY 2D, motion graphics and animation workflows for this. I'm not, I don't know what's the best way to phrase this. Feel free to jump in. That's the best way to phrase this. If you have questions as we go, I don't stand on too much ceremony. I'm happy. I have sort of a list of things I want to cover today, and I'm going to go through those things. If you all are feeling quiet and just wanting to listen this morning, I can run through it that way. But I know a lot of you are actually doing projects of your own, may have very specific questions. I find answering those questions when they come up to be pretty useful. So don't feel like you have to wait till the Q&A portion at the end of this. If I hit a subject and you have a question, just fire it off in the chat box. And then, I'll be like, hey, yeah, ask this question. And you can unmute yourself and jump in. When you're not asking a question, I recommend staying muted, because otherwise it gets to be like a pet store in here with just a lot of little animals chirping in their little boxes, and we're all confused, and someone's phone's ringing and a dog's barking, and no one knows what's going on. So just unmute yourself when you have a question, but do feel free to interrupt me and jump in and engage, because I don't mind that at all. And if I don't know the answer, I'll be like, I can't help you with that, but I can sometimes give you some specific workflow options. Last bit of the introduction, just so you'll sort of know the types of projects I've done. I did, my first feature was animated, or animation hybrid. We shot actors on a green screen, rotoscoped them. The rotoscope process involved hand drawing combined with image processing that we were doing back in 2007, and then created 3D and hand-drawn backgrounds, composited it all together into a feature film. I wrote the software for doing that hand-drawn and image processed look that I used for that film. And we composited using several different animation softwares, but essentially 5 of us did that entire thing in an office together in Austin. So that was, all on-site workflow, and I can talk about some of that. But I eventually evolved a lot of that workflow to several more projects, some of which I'm going to show little clips of today that were short films. Maybe the most well-known of those short films was The Phantom 52, which we premiered at Sundance in 2019, could be 18, 19. COVID has made me forget what year it is, but a couple of years ago at Sundance, we premiered the film, and that was an almost entirely remote workflow. So I'm going to use that as a sort of proof of concept to talk about a lot of what we're doing. And I'm currently in the middle, or I say in the middle, I'm towards the very end of finishing a feature film, which was intended to be done more like the first feature, where I would have animators working in an office together with me and a few remote people. And because of COVID, it became nearly all remote work. But we've been working on that now for essentially close to a year of post-production. And that includes hand-drawn animation, both on paper and also using various softwares, so digitally, hand-drawn on the computer. It also incorporates paper cutouts. It incorporates both acrylic and oil paintings, incorporates 16 millimeter film production. It incorporates stop motion. It incorporates video collage, and it incorporates live action actors. So I can't show you a clip of that because that still isn't, we're not releasing any of that publicly yet, but I can talk about what we did. And if that ends up being questions about your workflow, it's just a way of saying that I am currently involved in a wide range of different animated workflows. So there's my introduction, and I will jump into what we're going to kind of cover. And I want to just go with for starters here that remote production is just like any other independent production, in the sense that there's a few things that I think are the most important things to consider when you jump into a project. And I would say, this is something I tell all my students at the university, but regardless of what aspect of the film industry you're getting into, and really regardless of whether you're doing this as an independent production or as a major studio production or television or ad agency, anything like that, even above skill sets, everything else, the most important element in everyone you bring onto your team is reliability. And I really mean this with all seriousness, that these are very collaborative efforts, and remote production makes it even more collaborative. That the number one thing is that when you assign something, when you trust someone's going to do a job, that job is actually off of your plate and getting done. The minute that doesn't happen, it has a chain reaction of really destroying the whole production. And this is, when you're shooting on location and someone doesn't show up, everything's ruined. When you're working remotely and one piece doesn't come in, everything's ruined. That really is not an overstatement. So I would say, if you're looking at this from either of the two directions, if you're looking at this of joining a team remotely, reliability is number one. If you're looking at this as the boss trying to assemble that team, reliability is number one. Doesn't mean the others don't matter, but reliability is number one. So always keep that in mind. Second most important piece is friendliness and communication. And I say friendliness because I love the word friendliness, but you could also just say collegiality or professionalism. That everyone's going to be working hard on a project-based workflow, and we all have a goal to get to, and that goal is guaranteed to have challenges. If someone is hard to work with, it's very hard to solve problems with them. And so I really think that keeping a positive attitude is, again, even more important in your skill set. That if I don't feel comfortable working with you, if I don't feel comfortable communicating with you, it's going to be impossible to move forward, even if deep down you have the ability to solve those problems. So reliability, and then this, friendliness, professionalism / communication. And I'm going to really underline communication. That's always important when we're working together. But if you're all on set together and there's some communication isn't always perfect, I can put in the extra effort to communicate with you. If you're working remotely, that becomes impossible. So I don't know what's going on. If you're off in your house doing work for me as an animator and it's not going well, you really have to be proactive with your communication. So I put that as the number two most important thing in this workflow as you try to do remote projects. Now, third, skill is very important. I'm putting it at third place, but third place is, it's still the bronze medal. This one still matters. Be good at what you're signing up to do. This is especially important in remote production. If you're coming on as a rotoscoper, if you're coming on as a compositor, if you're coming on as any position, or you're hiring someone, they really need to know what they're doing, because again, you've completely removed your ability to look over their shoulder. to wheel your office chair around, you know, the office and just sit down next to them and see if anything is 90% right, but there's, you know, a problem that's going to sink into the entire production. That's kind of gone. So skill set is very important when you're working remotely with someone. Now, fourth, once you've got that, that's how you build your team, is you look at those three elements. And now you say these are all the qualified people. You really need to consider speed, workload, and schedule, and make sure those work for your team as well. Again, if you're in an office, then you know someone has the schedule. They can work. They're here. They're sitting next to you. You know they're in the office 8 hours a day, so you know you can give them work. You know kind of how fast they're going to go. Remote workflow takes that away again, and you're sort of throwing it into their arena and trusting it gets done. So really, when you're talking about hiring someone or you're thinking about taking a job, talk very honestly and seriously about the speed with which you work, about the workload that is going to be expected, and the schedule of delivery. Make sure those things are very clear up front. So now you've got 4 ways to consider who's on your team, and you've gotten down this far. If it's good, you bring them on. And I just want to close this like primer before I go into the specifics of this remote workflow. Is just like everything else in this business, casting/hiring is the most important step. If you don't build a foundation of the right team, everything's going to get harder. If you don't cast the right actor, no matter what you do in production, it's hard to land on the film you hope to have. The same is true of your remote team working in animation. So I would really, it seems obvious, but people forget this all the time. When you go into starting a project remotely, especially something that's going to be as challenging as DIY animation is going to be, because I'll put an asterisk next to this and say, however hard you think it's going to be harder. That's just, you just have to know that that's the world that you're jumping into, that animation is very difficult, and you're creating a world frame by frame, and you're micromanaging that entire world. That gives you an immense amount of power and creativity, but that power and creativity comes with an immense amount of work and challenge. And I can't tell you how many times people I have or haven't collaborated with or watched students, when things like this come out of someone's, you know, mouth, they're like, hey, I've got this great project. I just want you to do like a little animation for it. I'm just thinking like maybe like 10 or 12 minutes of the film. They're really asking you to do what could potentially be years worth of work on a project they put like a week worth of shooting into. There's this great thing in live action filmmaking where if the stars align, magic can happen in almost real time, and you cut that together and you can turn something around in 24 hours and wow everyone. That is not the world of animation. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter how creative and skilled. There's just an amount of work that has to go into animating. So having said all that, picking your team is so incredibly important, because that's who's going to help you get through this, and they need to fit all those categories. So cast and hire well right out of the gate so that you have a team you're comfortable with and they meet all those check marks. Then the rest of this will be hard, but it will always work. So let's jump into it. I've broken it down, and if anyone's taking notes, I'm going to paste these notes. Hopefully this is going to work. This little bit of notes into the chat, so you'll at least have these over here. That did not even, there it goes. No, okay. I think when I paste, okay, there you go. You got the workflow like 4 times, but you can look at it at the bottom. Unless I typed a single extra word, cut and paste didn't work in Zoom, because remote world. This is a good lesson. Remote tools are always going to be a little bit strange. You need to make sure they're always working on the same on every machine. I just saw, now I'm over there, I saw the question there about explaining the term rotoscope and such. And yeah, I'm going to get into all of those very, very detailed for everyone. But here, I just sort of broke it down into these 6 things, and I left the E off of morale. But whatever, typos happen in my class here. Planning, that's where I'm going to start with. Is planning is, with everything, planning is always important, but it's very important if you're trying to do a DIY animation project. The first thing I'd say about animation, whether it's your DIY or your studio project, if you're making a live action film, if you're making a TV show, if you're making Law and Order, there is a workflow, there is a process, there is a budget that you can create and your line producer can look at. And it's been, that trail has been walked a million times before you. There are very specific steps, and those steps are generally achieved at very specific spots along your schedule. Animation is different, and again, it's sort of obvious, but if you think about animation, if you watch SpongeBob and then you watch the Powerpuff Girls and then you watch Shinsaku Hayashi's experimental work and then you watch a Stan Brakhage, it's all animated, but it's all wildly different. It's not just an actor captured at this point and then edit happens and then this happens. So you are always inventing a wheel when you make animation. And in truth, if you look at major animation directors and producers, if you look at studios, even like Pixar, part of the IP, part of the value added that you're creating as an animation maker is you're building a workflow. You're inventing a wheel that says, this is how I come up with a crazy idea in my head and I visualize that on the screen. So planning is very important for animation because you are kind of reinventing filmmaking every time you create an animated film. And I never underestimate both the value of that and the difficulty of that. So when we jump into planning, what is it you should really be thinking about? And the first thing to think about is being a little bit flexible if you're on the DIY side. Everyone's heard the phrase that when you're making a project, you can make it fast, you can make it cheap, or you can make it good, make it good. You only get 2 out of those 3. Has everyone heard this? I feel like it's one of those pearls of wisdom you always hear. Well, now what you really need to think about doing is you just added, you can make it fast, you can make it cheap, you can make it good, you can make it remote. You've now got 4, but you still only get 2 choices. So imagine by adding remote, you really are adding one more challenge. So you can make it cheap and remote, but it won't be fast and it won't be good. You can make it, cheap, or you can make it fast and, what is it, cheap and remote, or fast and remote, or good and remote. You kind of have to pick one of those. So the first thing I'd tell you is the place that I would really just walk in flexible is if you're going to do remote production, take fast off the table. It's going to cause you a lot of grief. And I think I'm specifically focusing this on remote, but I would say this in a lot of production, that we all feel like our project needs to finish right now. We all feel like time is of the essence. And if you're working for an ad agency and the ad has to run next week, time is of the essence, but they're usually going to throw money at it. If you're talking about your own independent production, you just need to look yourself in the mirror and say, guess what? I can't be impatient. And you just got to take time off the table and say, this might take longer than I want it to take, but I care about it. I can't stress that enough. That's, if you take nothing else away from my workshop this morning, just tell yourself that though it might be disappointing, give yourself more time, because that's going to be how you make a better project, both in the effort you put in, but also because the second part, which goes with planning, you can't do the next step before the previous step is ready. And when you're all working in a room together, you can get away a little bit by saying, okay, I got my sound designer sort of starting, and every time you finish a scene, just walk it over to them, or they can walk over and look at your scene halfway done and get a sense of the vibe you're trying to create, and everyone's in a room, and you can get away with a little bit of this. In a remote world, if someone is in Paris working on their project and someone else is in LA and they're not seeing each other, you just can't start the next person until the previous one's done, or you're going to throw away money and effort on things done wrong. I promise you that will happen. So your planning starts right there. You have to really say, I'm going to go slow enough that one thing gets done and the next thing happens. This also is going to solve problem number 2 in the planning. The challenge of DIY is that you don't always have the resources that you need. But the big thing you get with DIY is you're in charge and there's flexibility. And flexibility is an incredible asset to any project. What flexibility allows you to do is take every challenge that comes and turn that challenge into a decision, turn it into an intention. Always give intentionality to your next step. So if we start on step 1 and someone creates backgrounds or whatever step you decided to pick, and you're creating the world in which you're going to animate your characters, and it's not quite the one you expected, well, decide, is not the one I expected acceptable, or do I really need to go back and make it better? If you have to go back and make it better or different, then do that. But if you look at it, you say, it's not what I expected, but it's a little bit different, then let your pipeline evolve and say, how does the next step make this, how is it complementary to what I've already got? And that is a little bit of saying, okay, you're making compromises. I'm not even really saying making compromises. I'm saying, look at what you've got and always figure out how the next step is the strongest decision. And it'll do a weird piece of magic. We all know people. I'm sure you all know people where, you look at like, well, all these things went wrong, but it was meant to be. They landed right where they were supposed to land. And we always say that. I'm going to tell you that I don't believe there's a magic hand of fate that makes things land where they're supposed to be. I'm going to say that that is self-fulfilling prophecy. If every time you're dealt I'll even call it a failure or a mistake or something didn't work out the way you expected, if you change that to a decision and say, what's the best way I can move forward? You're always going to keep making the best decision. And when you look back at your path, it will always look like it was meant to be because you made right decisions when things went wrong. There's a strength of DIY. There's not a board of directors that says, no, you pitched this, it has to look this way. It's you. It's you making judgment calls and making right decisions and doubling down on those decisions and saying, wow, this isn't what I expected, but I'm going to be creative and I'm going to take this and say, this is how now the end result is even better than I thought going in. So use that while you're making your plan. So create a plan, but keep that plan, flexible, and it will treat you right. So it's going to be the DIY strength. All right. So from there, what are you going to get in your plan? You're going to save money by not having an office. You're going to open possibilities and possible save money by being able to have the most diverse recruiting area you possibly could. The entire globe is now your potential hiring pool. You can get someone from anywhere. And not only geographically have you opened it up, but you've also opened up the possibility that you can work with people that are otherwise partially spoken for. So you can get someone who has a day job. You can get someone who might work with a studio and want to do this. Again, since we've taken our rush off the table and said we're flexible on time, it's opened you up to be able to work with anyone. And, again, this is something everyone says, but I think it's more than just a mantra, that diversity is an incredible asset to every type of creative pursuit. And being remote has given you every single possible kind of diversity. You are able to reach out to anyone who might be the best fit for this position anywhere on the globe, regardless of what else they do, regardless of how their workflow works. So you've now got diversity of experience, diversity of location, diversity of human, and even now, which we're going to keep coming back to in this planning, diversity of skill set and workflow and softwares they use and how they create their art. Those are all open to you. So use that as a strength of your DIY and use that while you're planning. So you consider each of these people that you bring in. All right, and that's fantastic. So you get all these benefits. So common remote strengths: access to staff that would otherwise be unavailable, flexibilities on schedules, wildly diverse styles, workflows are all possible, and the ability for both you and your staff to maintain side hustle, or this might even be the side hustle. So it means you don't have to walk away from your day job in order to fully commit to this 24 hours a day, because remote means now you can work 7 p.m. till 3 a.m. And I promise you, the Phantom 52, which we're going to look at as an example here in just a minute, I feel very proud of it. The film, premiered at Sundance. I couldn't have hoped for more out of that project. But I will also say that project was primarily made between 9 p.m. and 4 a.m. While I taught at the university. I gave myself a cutoff and said, you need to go to bed and sleep for a few hours before the sun comes up. So go to bed at 4, be back teaching at 9. Is it great? No. Is it possible? Absolutely. And I was able to do that, without having to quit my paycheck. So those are common strengths. Now, the common weaknesses that those come with, because nothing is free, are going to be lack of communication, chaotic workflow, lack of schedules, project becoming last priority for the people working on it, and ultimately media management and format regularity. So let's talk about how we solve those, because the others you get for free, these are going to become difficult. So as you plan this, what you really need to do is you really need to have a clear roadmap. And the clearest roadmap you're going to be able to give your remote team is what's called an animatic. And I highly recommend making an animatic. Your animatic can be sloppy. It can be any one of a number of things. And I'm going to show you right now a quick sample of the animatic I created for the Phantom 52. I used what was called Flash and is now called Animate, which is a software package that Adobe makes, and it's part of the Creative Suite, if you happen to have that. So it's easy to get access to it, and you can just, start working with that immediately. To be honest, there's, I thought I had the book, I can even hold it up, but Peach Pit Press does a great book called A Visual Quick Start Guide to, it was a visual quick start guide to Flash. Now it's a visual quick start guide to Animate. And if you get an old one for $4 off of Amazon, it'll still say Flash, but the program works exactly the same. So it's fine. But you can, in one afternoon, teach yourself to at least use it like a simple flip book where you can create layers and you can draw frame by frame and you can set up timing. And that's all you need for an animatic. So even if that's not a tool you want to animate with, even if you're drawing, as you're going to see in this one, I drew most of it using the finger pad on a laptop. So it looks like someone with very limited art skills drew half of this. And you can see the pieces I drew in other tools. So sometimes it gets better or worse. But you can jump in with that and lay it out. What's great about this is you can do the cheap work, which is the paper edit. You can continue to edit your story. You can do a temporary audio recording and lay it down with pictures. And do you like the pacing? Do you like the edit? Do you like the choices you've made as far as this goes before you spend the money to have someone animate it? And it will look something like this. And share computer sound. And there we go. Did sharing work? Is everyone seeing my Vimeo page here? Great. Move this up. We'll go to the animatic on here. And I'll talk over it a little bit. You can even see this was before I cast Tom Skerritt, so it was somebody's name in, but I timed this thing out and I figured out what this film was going to be before I really did the work of animating much of it. This has a few shots I animated, like here, you can see where I actually bothered to do the animation right. Really fast downloaded sound.
Anybody got their ears on tonight? Anybody got their ears on tonight?
Up here you can see I kept it running.
Anybody at all?
Shots that we were working on and time.
How about a radio check?
And this is sort of partially animated at the beginning. Your animatic doesn't have to look as nice as these early shots. In just a minute, the
really
early shots are going
to
drop out, and you're going to see what most of the animatic looks like.
Ain't many stops out here. Better save the fuel.
There. So most of it looks like this. And I said, okay, I know this is what the shot's going to look like. I figured out the timing of this shot, but I don't know
I'm not the only driver out here tonight. Come on.
I just laid all this out.
I can see you in my peripheral vision. Or sometimes in the mirror. How about you, Eastbound? What'd you leave behind? Come on. I know you're out there, but I'm afraid you don't know I'm in here. How about a radio check? Is this thing working? I know I'm getting out. Come on.
St. Christopher, on my CD line. It's called
Sperm and Bowhead all got.
Here we go.
The deeper I go,
Right there.
there's a river. It leads to a giant ocean.
Right there.
I'd be by myself tonight, but I ain't alone. That black river with yellow lines, I imagine it really is a river. It leads to a giant ocean. And just like the highway, the ocean is filled up with wiggly, writhing, swimming, soaring creatures driving all around me in almost complete silence. The deeper I go, the bigger everything becomes. The humpback trucks and gray trucks and enormous blue trucks and even the unicorns of the sea Nar trucks surround me. The big rigs of the ocean cruising thousands of miles a year on underwater interstates from Mexico to Greenland or from the North Pole to New Guinea. These killer whales and fin whales, these baby belugas and beaked bottlenose bride.
Okay, so you kind of get the idea. This is down to the shot, explained and drawn. So all the animators have access to this and they can look at it. So they know if they're working, has exact frame lengths, has exact elements they need. And what that looks like when you finish it ends up looking like this. Go to about the same spot. Here we go.
But I ain't alone. That black river with yellow lines, I imagine it really is a river. And it leads to a giant ocean. And just like the highway, the ocean is filled with wiggly, writhing, swimming, soaring creatures driving all around me. In almost complete silence. The humpback trucks and gray trucks, and enormous blue trucks, and even the unicorns of the sea. The night trucks surround me. The big rigs of the ocean cruising thousands of miles a year on underwater interstates from Mexico to Greenland or from North Pole to New Guinea. These killer whales and fin whales, these baby belugas and beaked bottlenose brads, minks, sperm and bowhead all got their own kind of CB radio, calling out into the pitch black depths with bellows and songs louder than jet airplanes. These whales can be thousands of miles from each other, but they know they ain't alone. Because they sing in narrow frequency.
So you can see we filled in exact shots that match that original planning. So if you do that in advance, this is going to give you a way to communicate and a way to make expectations of your animation team very specific. And that's what they're going to need to create. So you should start with an animatic. That animatic had a rough voice recording. And you can even tell I recorded a voice similar to what we were ultimately going to do and made slight edits to it. The one thing I would caution you against, and don't do this, if you do, when you do, because I would encourage you to do, just like you can have yourself, and I just go on there and do, my best half version of Tom Waits and, record the voice and say, this is about what I want. But what I don't want once I finally go hire Tom Skerritt, I don't want him to go and feel obliged to copy what I did because you're hiring a better actor because they're going to do better. So I would tell you to record a rough audio track, a rough voice track, so that you have that to work from, but withhold that from your final actor. So don't ever play your rough track for your cast because it kind of pollutes their ability to work fresh and new. So I'm going to tell you to do it, but that's one of the things you keep secret. So you do it with your rough voice recording. And then clear scripts and scene nomenclature. So stick to your script, while you're working with the animators. Obviously, if your voice actor changes it, then you make modifications. But while you're doing that animatic, be clear about what your script is and how long those shots should be, and do just like I did in that animatic, and label your shots. Keep that clear and don't change it. If you remove shot number 4 is gone. When you remove shot number 4, don't make shot number 5 go into number 4. You've planned this in advance. Everything stays where it is. Your final movie might not have shot number 4. Again, this is kind of stupid, but just keep it in your mind that you can't go changing things. You need to stick to exactly what you called everything in the very beginning because you're working remotely. People are not in the office, and changes don't propagate throughout your team. So changes should not happen in that way. Schedule, add extra time for the message in the bottle effect. The message in the bottle effect is this. If I'm working, I'll go with Lily since you're in the box next to me on mine. If I'm working with Lily and she's at home and she runs into a question, she's probably going to email me. I've set up my work schedule, so she was working at noon, and I know that I teach, so every day at 9 p.m. I check all the messages, and I get her message, and I have an answer to it, and I write her down and have, great, so now I've solved the problem, but she's not back on the clock until 10 a.m. That means that there was a 22-hour delay on a question that in an office might have been answered like that. but now there's a 22-hour turnaround on that. So just allow yourself enough time to know that questions might get solved slower. But we've got those. We might have is somebody's mic on maybe that has.
Andrea, maybe?
Oh yeah,
Andrea?
here. Not
There.
anymore now. I got you. All right. So, just make sure you have that message in the bottle effect accounted for in your planning. Put it in there. Don't make it something that throws you off. It's something you built in. And communication needs to be a part of this. Along with communication, let me mention just one really, again, these are the stupid things, but they'll trip you up. Time zones. Remember time zones. You got the beauty of remote work, but that means people are in different time zones. So when you do your initial planning, you tell everyone just pick one and go ahead and be self-centered. Pick wherever you are. That's the best one. So if you're working on a project with me, all times going out from the beginning should be assumed that they're Mountain Standard Time. That's where they're going to be. You pick that, everyone says that's what the time's going to be. So there's never, I thought you were talking about LA time. Wait, I thought you were talking about New York. I thought you were talking about Tokyo. All the different places that I worked with in this project that can cause great confusion. And once you pick that, the best way to help solve the message in a bottle and everything else is to be like, okay, I'm on the clock, I'm working this 5 days a week. So 5 days a week at 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, I am available. I will always be available. You can jump in. And now, as a remote manager, you have to just make sure you pretty much stick to that. If something happens, of course, you can cancel it once or twice, but you really don't want to. You want to have one place so that now while Lily's got a problem, she says, hey, I know I can solve this problem tonight at 8 p.m. And it might mean if I'm in a different time zone, I got to get up at 3 a.m. or whatever. But we've all agreed there is a time you can get a hold of me and my time will be your time and questions can be answered. So make that communication possible. So that's in your planning stage once you've laid that out. Now, the next step from planning before you get to be creative is management. And, a big part of the management will be time management. And, time management, motivation, and direction are going to be your enemies in this. So when I say motivation and time management, let's really talk about this one. Most of us have too much on our plate. You're doing DIY production, so you're not paying top dollar. That means people are working a second job. They're doing other things. You want them to care about your project. So that takes us right over to motivation. You need everyone to feel like they're part of a team, like it's moving forward, like they are incredibly important to what you're doing. So add not only for communication purposes, but I highly recommend if you're doing a remote project, once a week, if you can, create a short time where you can at least touch base with everyone and they can all log into Zoom or wherever and see each other's faces and be reminded that they're a team and they're important and they like each other. This will help motivate. Look, we're getting, and if you have milestones, if you can show work in progress to everyone, do that. Because again, in an office, you look over someone's shoulder. On a film set, an actor gives a really great performance and that warm, fuzzy feeling builds up in the whole team and they're willing to work the extra hours again because they cried at one actor's performance and they're like, oh my God, I think this film might be a success when we're done. It's worth my time. If you're remote working and you've just been drawing pictures for 2 weeks, you might start to feel like, why am I drawing pictures for 2 weeks? This shot looks boring. Get everyone together, show them updates, remind everyone this is exciting and like, hey, what we're making is cool. So do that. And then number two, again, these check-ins are helpful because we're all overworked. So it's very easy when you're overworked to take the thing that's less demanding and put it on the back burner. And there's your danger. You might have a really great animator working with you. They do excellent work. They care about your project, but they have a job making infographics for a pharmaceutical company that's always bugging them and asking them for revisions. So they spend all day doing that and your project keeps falling further and further back to the back burner. So management needs to keep that from happening. If you're on a film set, there's a really exciting role that is the assistant director. And the director and the assistant director are always walking off to the side and they have to play good cop and bad cop. And the director always has to be good cop and the assistant director always has to be bad cop. So on every film set, everyone hates the assistant director. It's not entirely true, but it's like 85% true. And it's not really because they're the worst person, but because, your actors can't be angry at the director. The DP can't be angry. Everyone needs to love the director and want to help them make their amazing magical vision. I would say in remote production, it's extremely helpful if you have a, remote production manager. So someone the director can have a private conversation with and say, hey, these people are falling behind. I really need you to put pressure on them. I need you to keep up with them. If that has to be the same person who's having to be the creative director in this, the person who's taking all these elements and making them into a good film, it's very hard to be the schedule manager, disciplinarian, motivator, and also be the person who's having to put themselves out creatively to pull this together. So I highly recommend having someone in management and being in constant communication with them. And their whole job is to make sure these remote workflows are all coming together. Now, that person can get called, in a traditional work, they might be a post-production manager, they might be an assistant director. There's a lot of titles this could take in the remote world, but the one I'd recommend is have a good post-production manager. And part of their job is just managing everyone's time. So yeah, and up and coming producers, absolutely. This is a really good place to work. And, I say you have to be the bad guy. Everyone's not really going to hate you, but, they know that you're making sure this gets done. And it's a super important job. And it's super rewarding when everything's done, because without a person making sure things come in time and are organized, it won't happen. So that's the first primary part of this manager. Now, this manager also has the job of making sure, again, this is boring, but if you are paying people, which you should be doing, even if it's not paying huge amounts of money, you really need to go in managing expectations. So people need to know how many hours they're authorized to work. They need to know what their turnaround should be. So if you work 20 hours, I'm expecting to see 3 seconds of animation, which that's a little excessive fast, but whatever. You pick your time frames. You say, this is how much should get done. This is how much I'm paying you. This is how you get these approved. And there's a process, because what you don't want to get is a miscommunication where someone works an immense amount of hours that you were not planning on paying for. And it just creates hard feelings on both sides. And then we go back to, my original thing where when communication is bad and professional friendliness is bad, suddenly you have a bad working experience. So being very clear in your management about how you get paid, when you get paid, how you record that is super important, and how much you're hoping to get people finishing. Again, it's great if there's a manager who's keeping track of this, so the artistic person's not also always leaning on them, so that if you're an animator, you can be looking at this not as if you have two bosses, but just looking at this, okay, I'm in touch with the manager to make sure I'm on schedule. I'm in touch with, the director to make sure what I'm doing is acceptable. And it makes sure people know they're meeting the standards that you need, because you're going to need standards, especially in remote workflow. So you're going to create, that type of environment. You don't have the ability to look over people's shoulder. You don't have the ability to course correct at the moment. So make sure you do have both someone checking in on how quickly they're working and someone checking in on how things look very, very often. Again, now we look at what are the strengths and weaknesses. A weakness this creates is if you're looking at Pixar, if you're looking at traditional animation styles where everything looks like one person essentially created it. When you watch a Disney movie, the idea is it almost looks like one person just sat down and drew the whole film, which is impossible. So that's not what's happening. But everyone works off of, style Bibles, and they work together using the exact same software in the same room. And someone is going and oftentimes, storyboard, keyframing and doing all these initial frames, and everyone's trying to make it look exactly the same. Very hard to do remotely. So what does this do? It says make a decision. One of the things you really get with remote, and you'll see that like when you looked at the Phantom 52, is pick discrete elements and cast styles for those discrete elements. So what you could say is, I'm okay with each scene looking slightly different. So, Lily gets one scene, Tracy gets one scene, Lillian gets one scene, Danny gets one scene. And you divide these up so that if the styles change slightly, that becomes a creative choice. It becomes a strength. And remote work lets you do that very well. Or you could say, Lily gets character A, Lillian gets character B, Danny gets character C, Ivy gets character D. And you can pick different people to have different characters, but find discrete ways so that you're not saying Lily does frame 1 through 24 of this character, and then Ivy picks up and does frames 25 through 90, and then Marlena does frames, 91 through 1,000. And what you end up with is a character that shifts and changes, and you want to try to avoid that type of thing in remote, because people are going to look a little bit different on their styles. Now you have to ask yourself, if styles are different, then there's a lot of different softwares we can work with. And just to throw out there, things you'll probably look at working with are going to be I love Animate as just a jump in and start your animatics and stuff, but Animate is going to look a little bit vectory. And just for the terms, so people can understand terms, there are really two kinds of graphics you work with in computers usually. Vector graphics are essentially the computer has formulas recorded, and those formulas describe geometries, and those geometries are redrawn. That gives you this very smooth, solid color, homogenized look. I like the Powerpuff Girls, so I'll use them. They're a great example of what vector graphics look like. Raster graphics are more like a photograph or a printer. So now your image, instead of being descriptions of geometry with mathematical formulas that can be recreated, it's essentially you have a pixel map and each pixel is assigned values and all those little dots make up a picture. Those are going to tend to look more hand-drawn, more individualistic. So you got to think about both those tools, which style you want. They both have advantages and disadvantages. Raster advantages are things will look more like analog materials. They'll look more specific to that animator, but they're going to be bigger.
Geoff?
Sorry, what?
Do you have an example of raster?
Yeah,
type?
so I mean, raster looks, traditional. So if you watched like if you watched like a something that even modern hand-drawn Disney or any of these, so something that's not 3D animated but still 2D animated, most of that stuff is raster, where backgrounds look like they have color washes. If you want something to look like old school drawn on paper, that's what raster is going to look like.
Which one was yours?
Mine is raster based. So the way, that water looked, the way the characters look, so it looked like it was drawn with crayons or it looked like it was drawn with pencils. That's almost always going to be raster based because it has lots of details, and then smoothed out things. So if you look at something, Flash is a vector based tool. So all that Flash animation you look at online, that's all vector based. Raster based will be harder to homogenize. So it's harder for two different artists to look like they did the same thing in raster based. Vector based is very easy for two different animators to look like they did the same thing. Vector based is also what's called resolution independent, meaning since they're formulas, if you need to make an image go from a 720 by 480, web animation and you want to turn it into a 4K, you can just scale it up and you don't get any new details. So it's not like when I get closer and you see all my wrinkles, you don't get that benefit. But what you do get is a bigger image that doesn't get pixely. With raster based, it's a pixel map. So it's just like when you download a JPEG, which is a raster based image off of the internet, and you scale it up and then suddenly everything looks like it's made out of little boxes. Rasters can't do anything besides make those boxes bigger. So there are benefits to both ones, but I think that you should make your decision based on the style you like. Look at your style. Do you want this to look like analog, very little detail heavy work? Go raster based. Do you want this to look smooth and computer and graphics oriented? Go vector based. Does that basically make sense to everyone? So you'll see those terms, but they give you software options. And Animate/Flash is a vector-based tool that's very fast to learn, but has a lot of limitations on the styles you can create. Now, there are workarounds where you can do what's a hybrid of these two, which means you can draw with a vector-based tool, but fill regions with raster-based textures. I'm not going to get into that just yet, but just if you're more advanced in doing animation, there are ways to hack Animate to get something that looks a little more raster-based, but it involves a few workarounds. Toon Boom is a little more advanced version of Animate, in my opinion. It's another vector-based software, but gives you a lot more tools, takes a little more time to learn, costs you a little bit more on the front end to get it, but you see it used in a lot of vector-based television animation, is mostly done with Toon Boom in many, many cases. The other option is going raster-based. Your raster-based ones that you're going to usually work with, there's a program called TV Paint. It's a French software that I really like, and it's what I use primarily on the Phantom 52 for my drawings. TV Paint has really wonderful brushes that look like analog pieces. So it looks like you're really painting on paper with an actual paintbrush. It looks very good. The one downside I'm going to tell you about TV Paint is I find TV Paint's its interface is a little clunky, and most of the support materials are in French out there in the world. So when you're trying to dig for like, oh, I saw something cool done on TV Paint, how'd they do it? There's at least a 50% chance whatever help file you're going to find is either in French or clearly a person who English was not their first language. So just be aware that the kind of it helps if you've already learned something like Animate to jump into TV Paint. So you're learning your second animation software, not your first. I'm just going to throw out, there's some difficulty in the learning curve. What I will say is it has what I think are the best analog emulator brushes, meaning you can draw something with oil paints in TV Paint and it genuinely looks like oil paints. And I think that's really good. And it has great frame by frame ability. So I like that. Photoshop gives you a similar result to TV Paint. And I have a lot of friends, because they're already good using TV Paint, using Photoshop as a still software, that they use that for doing frame by frame animation. What I don't like is I don't love the interface of Photoshop for doing frame by frame. I find it clunky, and playback isn't good and all those kinds of things. But what is great is Photoshop gives you immense control over image and really good raster-based tools. So I'm definitely not telling you not to use it. I'm just saying, with both TV Paint and Photoshop as your primary tool, expect a learning curve that you've got to get over, but expect really good rewards for sticking with both of those. Regardless of those softwares, if you use them, what I think is great about all of them is you can export these elements and composite them in After Effects. After Effects is an excellent and easily accessible compositor. And compositing just means you take all of your different elements, you put them together on a timeline and create a final image that you can render out as a quick time and make delivery and make it whatever, scale, size, color correction, all those things. I recommend doing this instead of trying to stay in one environment. So I don't work where I go into Toon Boom, finish everything there and render out a Toon Boom. I go in and create characters in Animate or Toon Boom or TV Paint. And I export them as PNGs with alpha channels. And I bring those image sequences into After Effects and composite there. And for remote, this is going to be extremely helpful. And I'll get into that in just a second, why this is a real strength on remote. I think it's a strength even in localized production, but in remote, it's super helpful to do it this way. But right before I say it, I'll just mention two other softwares. A new one that I have not actually used because I don't have a fancy enough iPad, but a lot of my animators in my feature are now using Procreate. Procreate, again, is why just exporting PNG sequences is going to be really helpful. Procreate is not good at exporting an actual animated file that's usable on the rest of your program. But what Procreate is good at is easy, cheap, mobile production with paintbrushes that also look very much like analog materials. So if you have people animating for you that are good artists but aren't necessarily motion artists, they're not used to doing things in that environment, you can, especially for rotoscoping, they can bring an image sequence into Procreate and they can rotoscope. So this brings up what's rotoscoping. Rotoscoping is a fancy word for tracing lots and lots of images so they move. The best example is that Aha video. I feel like everyone's seen, "Take me on," that's rotoscoping. So is Waking Life, and the stuff that came out of Austin for, Waking Life and Scanner Darkly. So that's what rotoscoping looks like. And you see it in a lot of my work as well. But you take a video file and you actually trace over the characters. Rotoscoping is very effective on Procreate, and you can do it on an iPad with a $50 software.
I have a question, Geoff.
Yep.
Does rotoscoping always only happen based on live action stuff? Or do you rotoscope when something is also hand drawn?
Well, you can do either one. I mean, rotoscoping, when I say it and it's tracing, having taught having taught students animation for years, they're going to usually jump to this point where they're like, rotoscoping is easier, and that's what they want to do because, they don't have to think about this. Let me just put an asterisk next to that and tell you, from a time standpoint, rotoscoping is harder. It's always harder than just hand drawing it. When you hand draw animation, you get some idea of motion. You by default simplify and take shortcuts. So you make your workflow faster. When you rotoscope, you are married to every single detail and you're forced to account for every, if you rotoscope me giving this lecture and I scratch my head and I do this, or I adjust my jacket or I do this, okay, if rotoscoping, you were forced to account for all that animation. If you were just hand drawing me, you draw a body that might just be a loop that never moves, and occasionally my head goes like this, and I have just a mouth cycle. It's less work. So the long answer is yes, you could rotoscope anything, but usually people avoid anything that's not complex character motion in their rotoscoping, and they avoid the other stuff because it's just more work. and you don't want to add work. So rotoscoping,
But
like
potentially rotoscope just a part or just a sample because you wanted a more detailed part.
exactly, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, they rotoscoped Snow White throughout that entire film, you know, going back to 70, no, more than 70 years ago. But if we go way back to the origins of Disney, but the dwarves were not rotoscoped because they didn't need as much detail. So they were traditionally animated. So it was just, they wanted the dancing. They wanted Snow White to look beautiful and move smoothly. So Snow White was rotoscoped and everything else was 2D animated. So that's generally where you use rotoscoping. And very complicated motions. The other place you're going to use rotoscoping is if, let's say I asked you to animate someone doing this. If I just asked you to animate someone doing this and you had to draw that, it's not a motion we're used to computing in our brain. So it's hard. Like, what's his leg doing? So even if you do a style that's more just looks like traditional non-detailed animation, rotoscoping is often used for difficult motions as a reference. So if you were to rotoscope me doing that, it doesn't have to look like me. It could be a banana with stick figure legs and arms doing that. But you could also use as a motion reference. So that's the other time rotoscoping gets used a lot for, like, I can't quite figure out what it looks like when a banana waltzes with a potato. And you're like, okay, well, I get two friends to waltz. I do video of them. And even if I don't rotoscope their details, now I know how the banana's arms should move and how the potato's legs should move. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes. Does rotoscoping have something to do with when we see graphics on screen and live action things as well?
Yeah, almost always.
They used it on my short and I literally did not know why we were hiring it or what it did, but it was used. And I think it was for the text on screen and the things that were on screen.
Absolutely.
On phones and computers.
In effects work, it's used all the time too. So if you need Angelina Jolie to run up the wall and shoot the bad guys, she can't really do that. So they've tied wires to her and moved her around. And there's, you know, a green screen element where you add like the window looking out to Hong Kong or whatever in the shot. And rotoscoping is also used where you go through, and even though no one sees your work, a lot of rotoscoping is still the exact same technique of tracing people, but it's to remove wires, it's to clean up effects, it's to clean up green screens and keys. So yeah, you use it for almost anything where you feel like I'm looking at a graphic world or even a photorealistic world that's been combined with a human character. You should assume some amount of rotoscope, at least for cleanup, was probably done. And as a side note to this, if you're working in After Effects, there's a really good tool called the Roto Brush tool. And it is essentially AI aided, you know, the computer is aiding you on being able to rotoscope. And you still have to go frame by frame, but it looks for differences in pixel colors and hard lines and can help you adjust your rotoscoping. Beware if you're using that tool, though, that you got to go in and tweak it and do a little bit of softening because the computer is just looking for highlight differences. It can be very jagged edges when you use that. But that tool can also save maybe 75 or 80% of your work, and then you just have to clean it up, which if you're talking about doing 2 months of rotoscoping, saving 80% in 2 months is a major financial benefit to your team. So they're great. So rotoscoping is a cool thing to get used to. And if you rotoscope for a long time, you will also get better at your 2D animation and motion because your muscle memory learns what it looks like when someone runs. It learns what it looks like when, I mean, you might not think about this. Big motions in animation are easy. A spaceship crashing is really easy. You know what's really hard? A person starting to talk to you and slowly turning their head and doing something like this. Because what our eyes don't, this slight perspective change, when it's wrong, it offends our eyes. When a rocket ship just goes, the changes are big and it doesn't offend our eyes. We don't scrutinize it. So this is really hard to animate. That's super hard. Godzilla ripping the roof off a building, easy. Again, counterintuitive, but giant things are hard. If you rotoscope a lot, what you will get better at is figuring out what this actually looks like, because that's a weird drawing. If my forehead's closer to my chin, try and draw that. You know, perspective gets really difficult, and rotoscoping will make you better at perspective. So there's a benefit to all those hours that you put in doing that. But that would be the tools, and Procreate is a really cool, cheap, and new tool for doing that. I want to throw one last software in this list of ones to consider, and that's DragonFrame. DragonFrame is for doing stop motion where you're photographing things. And if you really want the most analog look, draw on paper, paint on paper, fold up pieces of paper, cut them out, and actually photograph those. And by far the best software, I think, on the market is Dragonframe. And it's relatively cheap and it works with a lot of different cameras. And the big thing that it's going to allow you to do is it allows you to photograph real world things. So for stop motion or hand drawn paper, it allows you to photograph them, but you can turn on all these great things called onion skinning, which is essentially like tracing paper, where you can see the previous frames. So if you imagine trying to stop motion, if my hand was an inanimate object, if you had a ghosted image of where my hand was in the previous shot, it's much easier to do small increments of change and make it look smooth. And there are even tools, if you say want someone to throw something, you can draw a path so you know where it needs to go. And then when you photograph on Dragonframe, your drawn path will not appear in the photographs, but you can see it on the computer so you know actually exactly where to adjust to move each frame. So if you're into stop motion or you're into hand drawn, Dragonframe, cheap, great, super good software. With all of those, I recommend exporting PNG sequences with alpha channels and compositing those in After Effects. So when we talk about our remote workflow, the most successful remote workflow for me working with animators is all the animators I hire, their job is just to export PNG sequences. And it all comes back to a centralized location for the final composite. So this gives me one last quality check. This makes sure that everything that's being ingested is the right resolution. And I know that I'm not going to end up with a Frankenstein of a final film where one scene is at the wrong frame rate or the wrong color space or all the different things that you need to really pay attention to when you're exporting a final professional quality product. So I highly recommend this goes with your planning, your management. Every single person you hire, they know exactly what they're supposed to give you. And what they always give you is, in our case of 4K, the exact right aspect ratio, the same color space, no alpha channel, PNG image sequences. That's what I would have everyone render out. And to that end, the very first thing you do with your animators in your very first training session, which I would also say, as much as I love group training like this is a project you're investing a lot of time and money in, do an individual training with every single animator and let them ask questions and work right along with you. Because if you solve the problem at the beginning and the workflow is correct, you won't have bigger problems later. And if you have a group of 20 people and you explain how to export to everyone, one of them's going to get it wrong. But if you have a one-on-one and they export it right there with you and upload it and the file's right, now they've got it right. So it's worth investing the time to do a one-on-one workflow meeting with every single person you bring on. And once you do that, they walk them through exporting those PNGs. Next to that, you've got to collect those PNGs. So here's a pro tip. This is another one, a good takeaway. Here I'm going to give you Geoff's secrets. It's $1 million secret. Dropbox, Google Drive, all of them are terribly annoying. And the first and most annoying thing, like in the case of Dropbox, is even if you pay for the more expensive Dropbox, if all of your animators don't also pay for the expensive Dropbox, the limits of the lowest limits of anyone on your team will affect everything. So it's this giant problematic situation. But here's a workaround. First thing is, go ahead and get the more expensive Dropbox just for yourself and create a folder in Dropbox for every single one of your animators. But this is a one-way street, and it'll solve two problems. First, it solves that problem. Make no one a collaborator. You can share those by link with them, but don't make them a collaborator. If you just share by link and all they can do is look at and download from your folder, they don't need the larger Dropbox subscription. So you do that. And that's the folder where everything you as the boss give to all of your employees. So that's a one-way street. When I say, to Tracy here, I'm going to give you, your reference material to rotoscope. Tracy always knows to go there and get those materials. So that's the one-way street. And then separately, and this is going to seem weird, but then I do it in Google Drive because Google Drive works slightly differently on the way you do it. Then I make a Google Drive folder, and that's where everyone delivers their materials to me. And they have another folder there, and they don't have to worry about their limits. It's just my limits that I've paid for on that Google Drive. And so there's a delivery folder with their name. But here's the second thing this does. The Dropbox folder, it's impossible for them to alter, change, destroy, or cause any problems to the materials there. So that's a great place to put things like, character design Bibles, anything you want accessible to your entire team, and you don't want, another team member to accidentally, if Daniel accidentally went in and deleted something, you can't. That's my delivery folder. So you've created a spot where your team can't change those, so it locks them in. And you can manage that. You also know this is a space where there's never an accident where one of your team members finishes something, replaces it, and you don't know if it was the work in progress you sent them or their finished work. And then way over here in Google Drive, you have a folder where they deliver to. It'll take everyone a minute to get up to that workflow, but it's a really nice workflow. Here's where you get things I send you. Here's where I get things that you send me, and they don't overlap. And now your post-production manager steps in too. Post-production managers is always notified when someone finishes work, and they download that to a whole separate place that none of the animators have access to. Now it's in my hands as the director and compositor. It's been taken out of that folder and it's deleted from that folder. So what's really great about that is now we don't have the major chaos of, is this the newest version or not? I got it. My post-production manager says this is the newest version and it's in the folder, and that's where Geoff composites from. And now we don't have 6 different versions all named something crazy where I don't know what the latest piece that Lily finished is, because this is a really easy thing to happen. We say it won't happen. You always tell yourself when you're going to make a project, you're going to call this my super awesome project 001, my super awesome project 002. But here's what ends up happening. Best finished version modified Tuesday 002. And that's followed by actual really finished version 001. That's great, but that not for me working with 50 animators are like, is it, which one's really the finished one? And then I'm looking at dates, and then I have the fear, is it the date that's on your computer? Was it the date it was uploaded? Is it the date where someone else opened it up? Chaos, problems, $signs. So you don't want that. So your manager should be emptying those folders all the time. So we only have your latest version in that spot, which means though, your animator should keep their own archive on their computer too. Don't use the Dropbox and the Google Drive as the backup, as the archive. That should exist on everyone's machines. You're using that strictly as the transfer. Does that pro tip make sense to everyone? That'll save you immense headaches. Those are for transferring, and they should be just draconianly managed where there is a process and you have to do that. It will help you a lot because that can be your biggest nightmare. Oh, software, I'm just looking at my notes now. I also want to mention on softwares, I use After Effects because it's really accessible and does what I want to do. But there is another way of compositing, which that's a whole nother masterclass I won't get into, called node-based. And Nuke is a really good software for that. So if you're just jotting down softwares, node-based gives you some advantages. I'm not even going to get into those, but when you get into the world of compositing or remote workflows, you might also see Nuke. And Nuke is what we used for Mars. After Effects is what I've been using since. Nuke is also more expensive. So
yep. When you say compositing, you mean putting together all of the elements.
Exactly.
Correct?
Okay. Yep. It's the idea of finishing everything together. Yep. So if I have one team member making, for example, oil painting backgrounds, another team member is rotoscoping characters, and I bring in those layers and I stack them all into one final image, and then I go in and do my own lighting and color correction and render out of there.
Yeah, and a lot of our people here are familiar with sound editing software, and so it would be similar to the sound editing software where you're actually seeing like tracks or you're laying them on top of each other.
And you could do your final composite in Premiere, for example. This is something I really am trying to get my students to get away from, though. A lot of people just stay in Premiere because they know it and they don't want to learn After Effects. And Premiere, I think Adobe's done a disservice by trying to make Premiere do a lot of things that After Effects used to do, because it's made Premiere unstable and it's made the interface less clear, and it's made media management in Premiere, in my opinion, terrible and confusing. They did it so that people could stay in one workspace. I'm going to just, I mean, they even made, what was that, Adobe, the Adobe Exchange thing where you could, I forgot what they called it, where you put all your files in one place. I get where they're coming from, but in my opinion, if you don't want to screw up a remote project, just keep things discrete. The best way to not have problems is to say, I'm compositing in After Effects, I'm editing in Premiere, I'm animating in TV Paint, and just keep them there. It's very easy to render files out and then import them into your other project. When you do these crossover things, you run the very real risk of accidentally messing up one of the other files, and you can't go back and you can't change that. So if you're in Premiere and you open up the After Effects file an animator sent you and you modify something, it's done, it's modified, it's changed, and the tools are slightly different. So sometimes just by opening a file in Premiere, you broke the After Effects one, and now someone has to go back and redo work. keep them discreet. It's one extra step. It's just one extra step. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, it's probably also best for everyone involved that all they have to worry about is their small piece of it.
It always
Don't
is.
need to
Chaos is your enemy. In remote production, chaos is your enemy. And the more you introduce things where people don't know exactly what they were supposed to be doing, the more likely someone does something wrong. And so, sure, maybe 3/4 of the time it won't cause a problem, but if 25% of the time you have a problem, let's say 1% of the time you have a problem, I promise you in your animated film, you're gonna have more than 100 shots. So if 1% of the time you have a problem, you just ruined your film when you could have avoided it. Keep processes discreet and you will be happier. Okay, we're almost to the end of this little bit, and then you can ask me questions, but real quick, delivery means, and I touched on that a little bit, and that's where I really think just be careful with cloud services, and I really do think Dropbox is a great one-way trip, and then a Google Drive for a reverse one-way trip for things coming back to you. But make sure those are clear. I really recommend what people call a white paper. So just make a PDF that has a link and says, as soon as you come on board, I send you your own PDF, and it's a direct link directly to their folder to pick things up, with a second link, which is a direct link to where universal assets for everybody are. And then a third link that says, this is where you deliver things, and it just treat everyone like they are not smart. That's the best way. Just list every single beat. It's why I like that Visual Quick Start Guide to Flash, for example, that book I was telling you, if you want to learn to make animatics. I like it because the author, she treats everyone like they're kind of an idiot, but that's the best, because most people are totally smart enough to use a software and to do these. Most people have problems because one stupid step got left out, or they didn't realize they needed to do it. So if you always treat people like, I'm going to spoon feed this to you, it's very easy to use as a reference and get spoon fed, and then you get it right. And you find, oh, I was supposed to be clicking this one checkbox, and that's why nothing was working. And it's not because you weren't smart. It's because for some reason you forgot, or no one ever told you about that checkbox. So I also, when you make these white papers, make them long and boring and step by step. People are fine reading an extra step. It won't take them very long. But you make sure it's clear, and make sure your delivery means makes a lot of sense. One little thing with delivery means, in my project, because I'm just working at home as well, I have really encouraged people to take the rendering on for themselves on their end. I'm also doing this because we're using a ton of different softwares and workflows. So it's best if the person doing each bit of work can render where they're at. But if you're making an animation where everyone's following the same workflow, then it may be worth your time to make sure everyone has the exact same version of the software. And look, I love Adobe, but Adobe subscription is introduced a horrible chaos, which is like every 4 months, Adobe has a new version of software, and they are not very good at being backwards compatible or compatible across PC and Mac. And so you have this real problem where if we both have a subscription and your computer's 2016 and mine's 2018, we're now running different versions of the software. So I can't open your After Effects file or your Animate file, or that's a nightmare. But if you have a project where everything is really heavy on rendering, you can set up a world where people upload their files to you, and you have one server set up to keep rendering things. But that's a complication that you should only do if you have a dedicated post-production person who really is very good at keeping up with versions and formats and wants to render things out. For me, it's been simpler to just give detailed instructions on render outs to people on their end. But just know that there's not a right answer there. Those are two diverging places you may come to in your work, because rendering is its own complicated universe. When you deliver, though, let me just reiterate, since we're on delivery, I love PNGs, high quality PNGs. They're not compressed. It keeps my colors that I need. Keep them full resolution or bigger. I would actually recommend, if you're doing 4K, if you've got the bandwidth, have everyone pick a size that's more like 6,000 pixels wide for the PNGs they send. The reason for this is when you get into composite, if you want to do slight reframing, you're not going to lose any quality, and it can be really helpful. But everyone has the exact same size they're rendering out. They're PNGs. They always have alpha channels. And make sure that people understand what compression is, and that they're not basically doing that to those files, because compression will be your enemy. And then you're the one actually rendering out all the quick times, so that you're not worried about one person used Apple ProRes 422 and someone else used H.264 and someone else used animation. You're not going to run into those problems. You're always in charge of that at the end. So do that with delivery. And right under that is quality check. And this is the last bit of this little management thing. You got to have quality check if you're working remotely. So create an accessible spreadsheet where someone's in charge of literally color coding or check marking, so that if you're one of the employees animating, you can look and yours is marked red. It means you need to redo it. So now you know you need to jump into communication, figure out what didn't work. Or it's marked green, means it's done. Don't work on it anymore. It's already been accepted. It's been into the final mix. And that decision should be made by one person, because you can't have varying levels of quality check. So generally, a director ought to be in charge of going every day. So the production manager is like, okay, you know, whoever just finished Ivy's done with this sequence, it's uploaded, check it. If it's good, we call it good, it's moved over and no one touches it. So you need to have that as the last stage. All right, now you've been listening to me go on and on and on for a long time, and you're probably tired of my voice, but jump in with questions that you might have. Even specific if anyone's working on a project.
I'll go since I have been talking this whole time. But I just want to say, first of all, this is incredibly daunting and you're amazing. And the fact that you've done this 9 million times just blows my mind, while also having full-time jobs and writing entire screenplays. Like, this is nuts. I'm already so tired and overwhelmed just thinking about it.
Not for everyone. It's definitely not for everyone.
Yeah, I think a lot of people maybe coming to this are like, oh, I want to make cartoons. That sounds so fun. Or I want to make an animated short. That sounds so fun. And what we come to find when we start to do it is, it's incredibly time consuming. If you are not an illustrator or an animator and you're on the side of, I think what most of the people here would be like me, which would be a writer, director, or somebody who wants to bring an idea to life, you're going, whoa, I had no idea. And, you know, I've shot tons of live action things, so I do know how much time that takes. This is just entirely different. It's such a completely different beast. So let me try to think about how to frame my question. First of all, I think it would be helpful for all of us to understand a little bit about how you make the relationships with your animators and how we can get to finding the right people to help us bring this to life. Because yes, you're saying, you know, we need to organize them. They need to have their expectations laid out and all of these things. How are we meeting them as filmmakers who want to work with them?
Excellent question. And I think, you know, some will depend on the network you already have. So let's say you're someone who works in video games. Odds are you're going to already know a few animators. Let's say you are on the film festival circuit and you've played movies. Odds are you're going to know some animators. So the first place I'd start is, do you have a network? Do you already know some people? Do you go to a university that has an art department that might have good artists already working? So explore who you might already have access to, because that's any common element is always the best introduction. So that would be the first place I would start. I mean, it's even something I do with my students. I have a Facebook group for my ex-students to just all join, because they at least have the common element where they can be like, oh, we made fun of Geoff for a semester. Oh, you did too? These are the same things we thought were crazy. You have some tiny common element that can connect you and open that conversation and have a common background you can lean on. If you're totally coming to this blank where you don't know where to start searching, places to look are honestly, look at animated film festivals that have short film components. People who make short films are generally doing it themselves. So you're generally getting someone skilled who understands the animation process, who's done those things. It also gives you a chance to look at what they did and say, is this what I like? Is their style compatible with my vision? So that's a great jumping off point to just contact people. If you do that on features or something you watched on Netflix, all those people are already making a kind of salary you're unlikely to be able to pay. So it's a bad place to look for someone. But if you're looking at short films, you're looking at people who are possibly new to this, possibly doing this as a side hustle, people who are going to be more likely to be interested in your project. So that's a great jumping off place. Also, people who make short films, when you make a short film, you hope people will watch it and eventually like send you a message and tell you you're amazing and they love your work. So do that. Get their email, write them on Vimeo, write them on where you watched it, wherever. Vimeo, staff picks, any short film sites. There's lots of great places to see really cool animated work. But write the person who made it. Tell them how much you liked it. Tell them you're interested in a project and you're thinking about hiring animators. Would they be interested? And generally, you'll either get yes, I'm interested, or those people are connected to animators. And like, I'm not interested, but these 3 people that worked on my project probably are, and they send you those emails. So that's step 1. I think that's a good way to begin.
So helpful. That's major. All of that is like so true, because I'm a filmmaker making shorts, and anytime somebody even notices anything I did, I'm existing in a vacuum, and I'm like, oh, you saw it?
Yep. And you liked it,
Yeah, and you liked it. And even if I'm so busy right now, I will be like, no, but I know a girl who's just graduating college right now who would be so down to get some experience.
100%. So it's a really good way to find them. And then once you find them, and let's say you're an animator trying to find those opportunities, now have some sort of simple website portfolio. And I think, you could easily use a Squarespace or a Wix, free one, and Vimeo. And I would say pay a little bit for Vimeo so you have a little more control and you can put it. But then when you're looking at, go through their links, because they'll send you a link and they'll be like, oh, here's my portfolio, and look at their 10 films they've done, their 10 animations, look at their sample walk cycles or lip sync, look at whatever they've got on there. And that's really where I jump off and find the people that match you artistically and seem excited to do the project. That would be where I'd go for hiring.
That's so cool. Thank you. Yes. I'm sure somebody else has a question. I will think of other ones.
Any and all questions. If you have none, I can also show you just a couple quick samples and talk about the remote workflow I use to make those, but I'm very open to questions if you got them. You guys want to see a quick sample thing again? I'll do a screen share here and go back to these. This is a project. Limited real estate here on this laptop. There we go. This is a project that I did that was a collaboration between a choreographer and a composer and me as an animator. And we were able to work remotely between China, Maine, and Texas when we made this. So I was in Texas, the choreographer was in Maine, and the composer was in China. And so this is a little bit like an exquisite corpse where everyone was able to upload their piece and then you take the next step. So Vimeo can be a really helpful tool for doing that, and you just keep iterations. So this is the second iteration. This is what I did first. So I was sent the composer's music, and I created imagery that I turned into a simple video file. And I used Flash and After Effects to make this.
我很好，我很好，再见，很，在，你，再见，在，我很好，你好。你好，很，在，我很好。
And these elements, once I worked with these elements, I was able to send these to Maine, where they were able to be projected and incorporated with the dancer.
很，我很好，我很好，再见，很，在，你，再见，在， 我很好。你好。你好。很。我很好。再见。你。你好。你好。我很好。
And then so ultimately had a large deal of then raw footage like this that was sent back to me ultimately to edit into, this isn't the finished film, but there's a finished film that's shorter, then more edited to the choreography. So even some of this, your remote workflow doesn't even always have to be, 10 animators working. It's very easy to use a remote workflow to just be able to hand pieces off. And tools like Vimeo and Zoom make that very easy to work.
That's really great. Can you speak a little bit about that, about the process of perhaps this is where my mind's at right now on my current project, and I'm lucky I have two of my awesome collaborators here and one of my third ones here, but I am more interested in kind of releasing some of my initial like hopes and dreams, where like I'm picturing it as, a 30-person animation team, but now maybe more interested in working with just one core animator and maybe a background artist or something like that. Can you scale that down a little bit for us to
Yeah, absolutely. And
also, could you also include for somebody who is not as technical as you, because to be the one who's going to check all the files and things like that, that's really daunting to me and maybe some of the other people listening.
I mean, as I sort of said earlier, I think that's where I would tell you when you're like, okay, who do we have to afford? Get that person. I mean, especially if it's already daunting to you, but I think even if it's not so daunting to you, try to get the person who is the technician. So they're not having to totally make the larger artistic decisions. What their job is to do is take the disparate elements and combine them in whatever way looks the best. Really have someone who that's their whole focus. That's all they do. Their cog in this machine is pieces are going to come into me. And where I'm going to be an artist is I'm going to get these pieces all to come together and look really nice. And so in this type of, let's say it was even only 3 people. Let's say it was an animator, it was you with some actors, and it was someone who's finally putting all that stuff together. So even as simple as those 3 elements. I'll add a musician too. So just to kind of use like what we did with this film. As much as you can, make sure that machine is it's like a factory line, so that it doesn't just sit on you for a long time to do all of your work and then hand it off. That's not very collaborative. That's daunting. You stop understanding what it's going to look like. It doesn't evolve. So I think the real key is you say, okay, I shot this one scene. As soon as it's shot, send it to the animator and say, okay, now you animate the things that are going to go with it. And then as soon as they're done, have them, not with the whole film, but that's bit, they send it over to the compositor. They put that together. It goes back to the musician, and then it comes back to you. And what this does is it will create a self-feeding machine, a perpetual motion machine of inspiration. And you need, I think, for remote to work, each person needs to feel like they're actually collaborating, they're actually interacting. So the smaller pieces you can break this into and hand them off and have it come back new and exciting to you, it just makes, because then you get it a week later and you're like, oh, now I want to jump in and shoot more stuff because this looks so cool, or this is what I want to change. So just keep that road moving.
What's the reasonable amount to do at each time to shoot? Like how many frames and then send if you're doing it that way?
I mean, my gut is the shortest, possible. And that the answer to that question really depends on the style. So if you're doing, it really depends on how detailed, because even like rotoscoping, if my rotoscoping is simple and not very detailed, I can crank out 30 seconds in a week. If my rotoscoping is super detailed, you might get 1 second in a week. It can be wildly variable depending on how hard the work process is.
But so you'd say that that's like a good range. I mean, because for most of us, we like don't even know the range. Yeah. So if you're saying 30 seconds per week would be something that's not super detailed, just mouths are moving, maybe some eyebrows and a gust of wind in the background and like a tumbleweed.
That would be that's plenty for one person to do. And
Okay.
so again, and I think again, if you set up at your planning stage, figure out how fast you expect people to go. I think a week is a really good magic. Like rather than saying how many seconds did you have, I would say how much can a person do in a week?
Yeah.
For
And then you
me,
can
yeah,
check it.
every Monday I got a piece coming back, and I can, just like you get up in the morning and check your IMDb number and see how high you're doing and how popular your films are. If every Monday you check the project and say, oh wow, now I'm inspired, it's a good. So whatever the time frame is, however much your team can get done in a week, it's great if everything's always somewhere on that wheel. So each piece, everybody's working on a different spot, but Monday the project hits me, Wednesday it hits you, Friday it hits Lily, Monday it's back to me, Wednesday it's back to you, Friday it's back to Lily. You just that's a
Okay.
great way to keep everything
2
going.
questions you've given me now, and if anybody has more, like write in the chat, like I have a question and I'll shut up, but otherwise I can keep it going. Musicians, you think they should work alongside the animation and be doing these piece by piece, or do you think they should write an entire score that goes to the animatic?
If you are, I think the latter is usually better. The case of this particular project, the music was so experimental and evolving, I think it worked to keep handing it off.
Mm-hmm.
In most cases, I would say it's helpful if your musician at least gives you the rough recording off the animatic, because you're going to, so much of your animation will probably have to be created to sync with the sound. So even if they do a final different recording of it, or maybe they get to embellish a little bit, I would generally have them. Yeah, I just saw Brittany there said, yeah, husband's a composer and works the animatic. That's
Same. We're gonna use the partners to get the music done, Brittany.
that's mostly the most likely, the most successful way to do about that.
Oh, Tracy, where to find musicians? Good question.
They're a dime a dozen.
No, it is a lot of musicians are looking to do scores and have a sample. That is one thing I do know. And let me think of, yeah, Lily's got a good idea.
Yeah. Your local community will probably be full of some really cool and interesting musicians. Bandcamp will be, you're not going to get the Rolling Stones. So, try to listen to some independent music. And when you like independent music, contact those people. Also, frankly, you could even do Google searches for film composers. And there's a lot of, aspiring film composers out there who do have whole websites with their work and will work cheap and or free depending on how cool your project is or high profile. There are a lot of people who want to get into scoring films. And
Tracy, honestly, I'm willing to offer my own just resources here. I'll put my email at Help Network for you, and if you get to that point in your project, I will be so excited for you, and I will personally let you know a bunch of musicians I know with different styles that might be. The Help Network specifically has a big network, because a lot of people who work in dialogue recording are actual musicians, and they themselves might be trying to work on getting some composing for games going. So oh, great, cool. See, we're already starting a community here. And so let's all put our emails in the chat if you're willing to, so that, we do have that community, because like we're learning from Geoff, this is like takes a village of support to get these things. And sometimes you never know, like someone else has resources that are just dying to get a sample as well.
Brittany just was like, oh yeah, my partner does these things.
Yeah.
If you've started to build your team, if you have a screenwriter and 2 animators on board your team, ask them, because it goes bam, it's a spider web network. And if I'm already working with someone, they're a person that can vouch for the other person, it already gives us a likelihood that that's a smoother transition to bring people in. So if you have a team you started working with, that's a great place to start. Ask them, hey, anybody have a composer they've worked with recently that they really love? Because chances are you're going to get 2 or 3 recommendations. So
Brittany, this is interesting to my second question, which is that my partner Logan, who's a musician, is also going to be using this as a sample for his sound design. So can you talk a little bit, Geoff, about now the process of sound design? Did you do that yourself for the Phantom, or what?
Yeah. So like that animatic version of the Phantom, I did the sound design, and I just used, there's a bunch of resources, free sound libraries out there where the sounds are not necessarily the best, or the quality's not the best, they're not as specific. But when I'm editing, when I'm animating, the general rule for the process is anything that needs to be sync, do that audio before you start drawing. So off of the animatic. So if it's a person talking before you do final animation, it's very hard to get an actor to talk matching lip shapes that you animated. So instead you want the audio first and then to match the lip shapes to that. If there is the sound of, you know, very specific things that are going to have to be in sync, like music and those cues, record that first. But generally we're talking about music and dialogue. Then do your animating. Then come back and do your sound effects. So if it's a laser sound, if it's footsteps, if it's Foley of jackets, if it's an alarm going off in the background, if it's wind, do that after you animate, because that's going to be much easier for someone to design and match to it. So when I'm animating, as I finish scenes, I throw in temp ones so that when I give this to a real sound designer, they at least know, oh, my intent was to hear wind chimes here. My intent was to hear, you know, these footsteps. So anything I feel like you need to understand it, I throw it in. But I put that all on basically a track that the final sound designer is generally going to throw away. And then a sound designer goes in and makes sounds that are unique to the project. So, you know, again, if I'm doing my animation, I animate and throw in like, and every gunshot it's whatever. I downloaded gunshot sound, and it's the wrong type of gun, and it sounds the same every time, but it's fine because we hear things happening. And just as a side note, for those of you who haven't worked with animation, implication of physics is all you need to make animation work really well. In other words, squash and stretch works because you make it feel like a physical thing fell down, bounced, and went back up. Now, if you're a real physicist and you look at how much, for example, dropping a bowling ball, how much a bowling ball does actually compress, it does squash and stretch in real life in physics, but it does it so small your eyes can't even detect it. But when you animate it, you just imply it. If you want to imply something speeds up as it moves towards the ground. With a sound, if you want an animation, a drawing, because it's clearly not something real, to feel like it's real, when you knock on your head, you could add this sound. And just like even looking at that, it feels like that sound's coming out of me knocking my head. It was really this other hand knocking on my desk. But, you know, I don't have to touch myself. You can go. And it starts to connect in your brain because the sound happened in sync. You need that for animation because animation, people are coming in with disbelief. It's just a dumb little drawing. But now if your dumb little drawing makes a noise when it hits things, if your dumb little drawing reacts, we believe it. So I do strongly believe in doing a temp sound design while you're animating to see if the animation's working. It's amazing how even bad sounds sunk up will take it a long ways. And then let someone make those sounds good later. But while you're working, rough sound design, download from the internet. Great way to go.
Geoff, thank you so much for all of this. This has been so helpful. I have to run off to jump into a voiceover for an animated session. But this has been so amazing because I'm producing my own micro animated short.
Great.
Right now. And so all of this has like kind of put together all of the things that I'm working on right now. And it's like, okay, great. Here's some check marks. Here's some things I can avoid making mistakes.
Yeah.
Awesome. So like, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming.
I'm glad you're doing that. I'm really excited to hear more about it. And just so you guys know, this is our informative webinar, but we're probably going to try to have an actual class with Geoff that will walk you through more of this in a real hand-holdy way. So keep your eyes peeled for it.
Very nice. Have a good session today.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, Brittany. She's a really talented voice actor.
That's great. Well, yeah, I guess it's about 12:30, so I'll let everyone, you know, much like I tell my students, there's only so much of me you can take in one sitting in Zoom. So I understand the brain getting full. But I hope to do more of this and reach out, you know, if you have questions, you know, feel free to forward questions people have on to me as well.
Will do. Thank you, Geoff. And everybody save this chat before we close it out. And make sure you connect with each other and connect with me and us, and we're here to give you resources. That's what Help Network is doing. And I'm here with you as a filmmaker learning myself. So
it's a good place to be.
It's a great place to be.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Geoff.
Yeah, thanks everybody.